We are live recapping Penn State's victory over Auburn, probably the most stressful 8-point victory we will ever experience as fans. Coming to you from Black Shoe Diaries, I am Marty Lee, back with you again this week, returning from his week 1 appearance. It is once again Ellie Moretta Feliz. I know we talked a little bit off screen about this, but how are you feeling? Have you calmed down? Has the heart rate died down yet? Because I know for me, it's still pumping a little bit.
I don't believe my heart rate is going to go down until at least 3 a.m. Sunday morning. So, I don't think I'm sleeping tonight.
No, I feel you. I just hope that whenever my dog wakes up he usually wakes up around 6:15, needs to go to the bathroom. I just hope by then I can let him out and just kind of let out the big sigh of relief when I'm on the back porch watching him prance through the yard tomorrow morning. I'm like, you know what? Penn State did hang on. Penn State did beat that big, mighty, bad SEC team that we were told all week Penn State couldn't handle their speed, and Auburn's seen many of atmospheres like the whiteout, and we will get to that. But to kick things off tonight, I think it would be a shame to not start this show talking about Sean Clifford. I personally have been as critical as anybody of Sean Clifford the last 3 seasons, but I have to admit that tonight may have been the best game of Sean Clifford's career at Penn State. Without the play of Sean Clifford tonight, there is no chance Penn State wins this game. He finished 20 out of 32, 280 yards, 2 touchdowns. Yes, that one interception, but that interception also came at the end of the half on a play where Clifford got walloped and was trying to throw one up for the end zone. So you kind of throw that out the window. Probably the best game, like I said, very possibly the best game Clifford has played in his Penn State career. Excuse me. We'll start with that. What are your interpretations of how Sean played tonight?
I think from our conversations in private, right, you know that I am a big Sean Clifford supporter. I supported Sean Clifford all throughout last season. Based on what's happening this season, I rightfully blame the coaching on how Clifford was playing on the field. And you're starting to see how that may have had more of an effect than we probably gave it credit for. 3 games now. We're gonna assume that Ball State doesn't count for now. But 2 big games, one on the road against a very stout defense in Wisconsin, one at home against their fans would say much more, but a decent team in Auburn, right? Auburn is probably not going to be a bad team this year. And it's not like Gus Malzahn left the cupboard bare when they fired him. There are athletes. And again, Sean Clifford delivered. And you can't you can't take that away from him, 1. And 2, I think the doubts that people may have had coming into the season are slowly but surely started to be turned into beliefs. And we'll see what happens, right? Penn State still has Iowa on the road, Ohio State on the road, Michigan State suddenly looks good, which is also on the road. Michigan suddenly looks good. So there are going to be plenty of opportunities for us fans to see how this offense progresses. But through 3 games, there is no denying that the Sean Clifford of 2021 is more reminiscent of the Sean Clifford of 2019. And I would argue he's a lot better than even the 2019 version of Sean Clifford.
Yeah, I agree. This is definitely the best Sean Clifford has looked in his entire Penn State career thus far. I think Mike Yurcich definitely deserves a lot of credit for this. I mean, I know last year, whenever Yurcich was hired, a lot of Penn State fans you and I included, were very excited about that hire. You look at a guy who's widely considered one of the top probably 5 to 8, not just offensive coordinators, but quarterback coaches in the country. And the thing with Sean is the talent's never been the question mark. The kid's got the arm to make all the throws. We've seen him make many a big boy throw over the years that a lot of quarterbacks can't make. With Sean, it's been the footwork. It's been going through the progressions. And that was one thing tonight I thought he did really well. There were multiple plays in this game, especially early on, which kind of helps set the tempo for this offense, where I feel like the old Sean Clifford tucks that ball, runs, gets 3 yards, and calls it a day. But there was a third down early in the game where he rolled out, did not tuck the ball, gave his receivers the chance to come back to him and get open, and he hits Keandre Lambert-Smith for first down. Later in that drive, inside the 10-yard line, does the same thing, gives his receivers a chance to get open, finds a wide open Jahan Dotson in the back of the end zone for a touchdown. Those are plays that before this season, Sean Clifford does not make. 2019, Sean Clifford doesn't make them, and 2020, Sean Clifford certainly doesn't make them. And I think as a Penn State fan, I know me personally, one thing I'm very optimistic about the rest of the season is Clifford now has faced 2 legitimate, probably top 20 defenses in the country in Wisconsin and Auburn. And yes, Ball State's Ball State. But as Tim and I touched on in the recap show last week, they're the defending MAC champions and brought almost their entire team back. They're no slouch. Like Ball State's probably going to win 6, 7, 8 games this year, and Cliff tore them up. There is a lot of reasons right now to be optimistic about Sean Clifford, be optimistic about this Penn State offense. And I really do think moving forward, you've got to feel good about Clifford. You've got to feel good about this offense. You've got Villanova coming up. You've got Indiana, who all of a sudden does not look intimidating. And I feel very confident saying after last year, Penn State is going to be extremely motivated against Indiana. So you've got 2 weeks to get your offense really humming before you go to Kinnick Stadium. And yeah, I think right now it's difficult to not be bullish on this Penn State offense moving forward due to a combination of what we've seen so far, the playmakers we know they have, and what you expect to get out of Mike Yurcich.
And on that point, right, because Sean Clifford is making good decisions, it allows the athletes on the offense to make good plays. Last year, because Clifford was not making good decisions, those guys did not have opportunities to make plays, and it only exacerbated an already tough situation with not having an off season to actually prepare, not having a ways to communicate with each other, having an offensive coordinator that wants to play a completely different style of what even James Franklin wants to play. And we'll talk about that decision maybe at some other time. But now you have a coordinator that knows how to use Clifford, so he puts him in the right situations. Once Clifford is in those situations, if things don't go exactly as scripted, he has a way to get out of whatever sticky situation he may be in and makes a good play. And then you have receivers like Jahan Dotson and Parker Washington, who basically are catching anything thrown at them. All Clifford has to do is protect the ball. And as you said, the only interception of the game, the only turnover of the season is on basically a throwaway play, which, it'll count in the stat sheet, but we all know that it doesn't really matter.
Yeah, and even that interception at the end of the half that he did throw, if he doesn't get pummeled by the Auburn defender, there's a real possibility that Lambert-Smith set
a touchdown.
Hand over touchdown. Yeah. If he has half a second more, maybe a quarter of a second more, that's a touchdown pass. And even as Penn State, you can't hate that there because you put Auburn in a position they took over at their own, I think it was 2-yard line, something like that. And yeah, I thought James Franklin coached a terrific game tonight, especially as we will get into shortly, the officiating that he had to deal with. But I think my only complaint with James tonight is I would have liked to see when Auburn nailed that ball, you had, I think, 2 timeouts. I know they had at least 1 timeout, maybe 2. Call a timeout and try and force them to nail it again from the 1. And if they did, they had 2, like you said, call another one. Like, try and sneak your way into an easy safety there. But, I mean, ultimately, it's a moot point. It didn't matter. Penn State won the game. But, yeah, that was not the worst interception in the world for Clifford to throw. So, I'm sure somehow, some way, because it's what we do as human beings and especially sports fans, someone will find a way to ridicule the game Sean Clifford had tonight. But listen, as Ellie can attest to from some of the things I have complained about in our Black Sheet Diary Slack channels over the years, if I have nothing negative to say about Sean Clifford, there is nothing negative to be said. The dude balled out tonight. I don't know if they finished this way. I know at one point he was 11 for 11 in the second half. And the only incompletion I remember him throwing after that was a pass on which Auburn got called for pass interference. So didn't actually count as incompletion. Just Cliff was awesome. And you got to give him a lot of credit, not just for that, but also he's a great team leader. And he really, I felt, kind of helped at some of the times when the officiating, as again, we will get into it momentarily, was a just disaster. You lean on your team leaders to keep the team from getting frustrated, keep things coming unraveled. And Sean did that tonight for the Nittany Lions.
Agreed. And we have the stat line going across the bottom of our screens here. 28 of 32 against an SEC defense. That tells you the whole story right there.
Yeah. I mean, I heard all week from Auburn fans how this SEC defense was going to be nothing like Penn State has ever seen. So, I mean, if he did 20 out of 32 against them, can you only imagine what he's going to do against these mediocre, just Big Ten defenses who just know nothing about football, unlike the SEC? But no,
then again, there's a red team out west, state over to the west, that probably does not want any of Sean Clifford right about now.
No, I mean, in all honesty, I know Tim and I kind of touched on Ohio State last week too, and it's as a Penn State show, it's impossible to not touch on Ohio State, I feel, because ultimately your goal is to be the Buckeyes. Your goal is to beat the Buckeyes, get to Indianapolis, get to the college football playoff. Through 3 weeks, Ohio State has looked very beatable. Their defense has looked very pedestrian against quarterbacks that, quite frankly, are not as good as Sean Clifford, against running back groups that, quite frankly, are not as good as Noah Cain and Kevon Lee and Devin Ford, and back in the fold, John Lovett, which was great to see John Lovett finally make his Penn State debut tonight and show some flashes, not just running the ball, but catching the ball in the backfield. Not to get too far off course, but as a Penn State fan, this is probably, I know me personally, this is the most confident. And again, it's only 3 weeks, but this is the most confident I have felt about Penn State's ability to beat Ohio State since 2017. And I really do think that the Nittany Lions are capable of taking down the Buckeyes, even though that game is in Columbus this year, and playing for a Big Ten championship and making the college football playoff. So, it's definitely a very exciting time right now for Penn State fans. And that Mike Yurcich hire is just looking like an absolute home run thus far.
Can we talk a little bit more about Mike Yurcich?
I'll talk about Mike Yurcich all night long, man. I love it. I love it.
So before we move on to the next topic, everyone probably wants to hear about the refs. I just want to touch on just how amazing it is not only to have a coach who knows the talent he's working with and puts the talent in a good position to make plays, but also like just having an off season to get that system and to learn what that coach needs to do. It's just night and day. And because it's only week 3, right? All we have for reference is the past 2 games, this one, and all of last season, where midway through the season, James Franklin basically had to take over play calling duties. And it's just, you look at all of those things, and, Penn State still won 4-5. Sean Clifford was still a shit show, part of my language.
You're good.
And so those things count, but like just knowing that this coach had the time to actually install his system, the system being a lot more similar to what Clifford is used to. And we're talking about a lot about Clifford here, but like, let's not forget about the offensive line here. But even then, right, this system works a lot better for them because the protections that they need to create for both Clifford and the running backs are a lot easier to actually pull because the plays develop so much quicker. So when you put that all together, it it I'm a Penn State fan, of course, and this is going to sound like a Penn State fan, but when you put that all together, it's actually not that surprising to see that this is the end result. Marty left us there for a minute, so I'm going to go ahead and fill out the time while he comes back and talk about off seasons and abilities to get offensive strategies put into place by our coaching staff. So Sean Clifford, as we discussed, went 28 of 32, 280 yards, 2 touchdowns, and interception. Those are not gaudy stats by well, the 28 of 32, yes. But 280 yards is respectable. It's not the 450 yards that actually Spencer Rattler didn't actually do that well today. So I'm going to go ahead and take that back and say that 28 of 32, 280 yards, 2 touchdowns, that's good. That's good enough for today.
Yeah. First off, apologize for what was my internet apparently wigged out there for about 5 seconds and kicked me out of the studio. But thank you for picking up the slack there. Appreciate it. But no, yeah, like you said, as Penn State fans, I think the expectations have really been raised the last years with James Franklin. I mean, as much as some of us, myself included, may complain about him at times, ultimately we have a top 10 to 12 coach in the country right now, maybe better than that. The guy recruits at a ridiculous level. The guy gets results on the field, and we've seen that pay off. You can throw last year out the window for so many reasons. Since 2016, Penn State has won 11 games every year except for one. In the 1 year they didn't, they won 9 with Trace McSorley playing on one leg for half the season. So it's undeniable what Franklin can do. And with the talent that's on this roster, it's not shocking to see them off to the start. And I just think that with Clifford, with Yurcich, with Franklin, they have finally found this kind of perfect marriage to put all together. And, just one last note on Yurcich before we move on. We see it in the comments on YouTube about the officiating. I see you complaining about it, Jerome. I see other people complaining about it in the comments. We're getting there, I promise. But I think one thing that needs to be remembered is James Franklin did hire Kirk Shiraka. His number one target was Mike Yurcich, and Texas came out and offered Yurcich more money. So this is something James Franklin has wanted to do for a long time. It has finally come to fruition, and we're seeing it pay off for the Nittany Lions. And, there's at this point with how poor Iowa's offense has looked, I have a hard time believing the Nittany Lions will not be 7-0 when they go to Columbus on October 30th and set up what's going to be one of the biggest games of the college football season. I'm with you. My laptop is on one of those wood lap resters right now. I'm knocking on the wood, but it's not unreasonable to see the Nittany Lions be 7-0 when they go to Columbus on October 30th, and what is shaping up to what has become the norm to be one of the biggest games of the college football season. So
you are absolutely correct.
To get into it, because Jerome Ellerby, I see you in the comments. Tim32984, I see you in the comments. The officiating tonight. We probably could have had an entire show about officiating. Actually, a good friend of mine was here watching it with me tonight. He's still here lurking in the background somewhere. And I told him that, Ellie, you're normally one of the more calm, down-to-earth, reserved people in our group chats during games. So when you were getting fired up about the officiating, it's bad. When you have Fowler and Kirk Herbstreit on TV getting fired up about the officiating, it's bad. And maybe this shouldn't be a surprise because it was an SEC crew with an SEC team, but man, there was so much of it tonight. That intentional grounding on Sean Clifford, I've never seen.
Don't even get me started on that.
Yeah, I've never seen it called before where it occurred because a receiver ran the wrong route. That's football. That's going to happen. You can't penalize the team for that. And that wasn't even the most egregious thing on that possession. The down, for anyone who did not watch the game, there was a possession in the second quarter. I think it was Parker Washington, I want to say. It was either him or Dotson. Clifford thought they were going to run a post. They ran a comeback. Clifford overthrows him. called for intentional grounding. Should not have been intentional grounding. The down marker got flipped from first down to third down instead of first down to second down. So it brings up a third, I think it was like 15 or so. Penn State runs a little out route to Dotson. They got about 7 or 8 yards. So you're thinking, all right, 3rd and 8, 3rd and 9, manageable with your passing attack. And the referee says 4th down. I don't know how James Franklin controlled himself enough to avoid getting a unsportsmanlike conduct penalty there. I would not have. As someone who coaches his kid's 6th grade football team, in 6th grade football, I would have lost my mind over that, let alone in this situation. And that was just the beginning of it. I mean, there was a no call on a intentional grounding on Bo Nix that was much more egregious than that. The fake punt Penn State ran where the whistle was never blown. PJ Mustipher lands probably 2 yards clear of the first down marker, and they marked him short of the first down by half a yard. It was just seemingly one thing after another. And I'm not one to blame officials. I'm not one to say officials are dirty or have their own little whatever they're going for. But man, when it's SEC officials and you have the SEC teams on the road, and there was a late hit call on Brandon Smith late in the game that might have been the weakest late hit call I have ever seen. Just it was one thing after another. It was so frustrating. And I'm sure people listening or Penn State fans will agree. The fact Penn State overcame such piss poor, excuse my language, such piss poor officiating to win this game made it that much more enjoyable for me.
Yeah, I am so glad that we don't have to talk about Penn State having lost this game because of officiating. And as you mentioned, right, I'm not one to complain about officiating. I do acknowledge that time and situation, and if a ref makes a bad call when it's close to the end of the game, that has a lot more impact than if it happens early in the game, which the most egregious of all the calls happened to be early enough that I didn't bite Penn State. But could you imagine if that call had happened on the drive where they went up 28-20, and that touchdown basically doesn't happen because they lose it down? That would have been. I don't even want to think about it. And as you said earlier, right, like level-headed. I'm not gonna blame the refs, but I've also believed one thing, and I'm gonna probably go around here, which is what. Look, I understand why conferences fine coaches and schools for talking about the refs in a negative light, but I would like for conferences to also acknowledge that, like, we sometimes treat refs like gods, and they're not. They're just people. Don't harass refs, right? Don't send death threats to refs. Don't actually assault refs, because they are human beings and we all make mistakes. But acknowledge that as humans, they made mistakes,
Yeah.
right? We're not going to pretend that what happened on the field tonight was okay. Like, you know, this basically took me back to the 90s in like a reverse bizarro world where instead of giving people extra downs, we're taking them away from people. It's like, that is not something that James Franklin shouldn't be able to talk about. And in fact, when Holly Rowe interviewed them at half, he like had the presence of mind to not even say anything, because he knew that if he actually opened his mouth when she asked about that, he was going to get fined. So the it's great that Penn State was able to overcome all of the mistakes, and I'd be a fool to say that some of the bad calls didn't go in Penn State favor. They did.
Mm-hmm.
But this crew, and I know that I'm seeing the comments, it's a lot about this being an SEC crew, but like the reality of the matter, the Big Ten refs aren't any better. So yeah. I'm gonna about to sit here and say that were this a Big Ten crew, that they would have made their own set of mistakes. But what I'd like to see acknowledged moving forward is that these refs are human beings and they can make mistakes, and we don't disparage them for making them, but we accept that they do.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I mean, I thought that interview with James right before going to the locker room was great because you could tell. Excuse
He
me.
was mad.
Yeah, when Holly asked him, "What do you think about the officiating?" It was almost like he went to talk. He said to himself, "No, don't do it." Took that deep breath and kind of shrugged his shoulders. Now, my personal favorite part about it was when Holly Rose starts laughing and she's like, "Yeah, what else can you say?" Like, they all knew it was poor. And like you said, it wasn't all against Penn State. There was a call. Now, this got overturned by review, but there was a play at one point where Jahan Dotson was tackled almost 2 full yards short of the first down. Originally, they gave him the first down. It was very poor officiating. Now, again, yes, Auburn got more poor calls in their favor than Penn State did, which, like you said, had Penn State lost this game, it would have been extremely frustrating for that reason. But again, also, like you said, as Penn State fans, we have watched so much incompetent officiating from the Big Ten over the years. Like, I would take this crew any week over any crew that has John O'Neill on it. Like, it's just no. John O'Neill is that's a name we try to avoid speaking in my household. It's just, but ultimately, like you said, I think the biggest thing is I couldn't agree more. If we're going to hold coaches, we're going to hold players accountable for speaking out against poor officiating. Officials need to be held accountable when they make mistakes. And this isn't just a college football thing. I don't think I have too much of a tangent, but like, I'm a huge baseball fan as well. You see umpires every game who are calling pitches that are 3 feet off the plate of strike, or calling pitches that are right down the middle of the ball. Like, officials in all of sports need to be held accountable as well. I think you put it perfectly when you said too many times you see these sports leagues almost hold them up as if they're some sort of gods. They're not. Yes, they're there to help the game flow just like well and everything. But at the same time, they can have the complete opposite effect on the game. And when they do have the complete opposite effect on the game, like we saw tonight, they need to be held accountable. They need to face repercussions, because what's going to happen eventually is you're going to have an officiating crew officiating an important game, a conference title game, two teams battling it out for a trip to the conference title game, a playoff game, whatever it might be, where they just get call after call after call wrong, and it winds up costing a team a very important game. And that is why we need to get to the point where we can hold these officials accountable and not just penalize coaches, players, etc., for speaking out against the officials.
And people might not be happy about what I'm about to say, but you could say that that's already happened, right? That happened to Ohio State a couple of years ago against Clemson in the
And the
Fiesta Bowl, I think it was.
Fiesta Bowl, yeah, in the college football playoff that year with that debacle with the fumble and what should have been an incomplete pass. Yeah, that cost Ohio State a trip to the national championship game. And obviously, this is not a show where we're going to say very many complimentary things towards Ohio State, but Ohio State got absolutely hosed by poor officiating in that game.
Exactly. And what could Ryan Day do or say? Nothing. Because refs are gods.
Yep.
Anyway.
If Ryan Day comes out and speaks out, he's held accountable. But yeah, anyway, moving on, I think one other position group that really shined for Penn State tonight, outside of the defense, which we will get to, because I thought the defense had an absolute just phenomenal game again. But sticking with the offense, man, this tight end room, it's got to be up there the best in the country. I remember before the season started, James Franklin and his staff talking about these tight ends and saying, Theo Johnson's a guy they think could be the best tight end who's come through, which they've produced Mike Gesicki, they've produced Pat Freiermuth, they've produced Jesse James. That's really saying something. And, tonight with the tight ends, Brenton Strange, has 4 catches for 71 yards and a touchdown. Theo Johnson only had 1 catch, but it went for 37 yards. Both were key blockers in the running game. Tyler Warren has 1 catch for 22 yards. He runs for a touchdown out of that wildcat formation, which I understand didn't work the second time they ran it. But for those who don't know, and for those who don't know, Tyler Warren was a high school quarterback, originally committed to Virginia Tech to play quarterback. Let me see more of this Tyler Warren package, because he can legitimately throw the ball and give teams a lot of fits. And again, Warren's a guy who's going to maul people in the running game with blocking. I think with Warren, with Strange, and with Johnson, Penn State, there's probably an argument to be made. Penn State has the best tight end group in the Big Ten, and maybe one of the best in the country. And I think that was on full display tonight. And those tight ends, in more ways than one, played a key role in the Nittany Lions getting a victory over Auburn in front of the whiteout.
I'm probably going to wait on saying they're the best tight end group in the Big Ten, but I will say that tonight they displayed all of the as you alluded to, right, in the offseason. James Franklin was excited about the tight end group. We were excited about the tight end group in the Slack channels. They did enough in the past two games, but in this particular game, you saw what value they're going to bring to the offense as we move forward. And one of the best things that happened tonight, right, is that everyone knew Jahan Dotson was not going to be caught wide open like he was against Wisconsin. Every time Penn State did literally anything on offense, there were like five Auburn guys ready to pounce on Dotson. So what did that create? It created openings for the tight ends, and they showed that the tight end being a position of strength did not end with Pat Fryermuth. We still have some guys that are going to make some plays down the stretch.
Yeah, I think it really goes to speak for, I mean, obviously Tyler Bowen has since moved on now, coaching tight ends for the Jacksonville Jaguars, but it really goes to speak for the culture that Bowen, that Mike Gesicki, that Pat Fryermuth, these guys who've since moved on to the NFL, creating the tight end room. Sean Fitz, who does a terrific job for Lions 247, has said for a few years now that because of those tight ends and because of Saquon Barkley, tight end and running back are two positions that recruit themselves for Penn State. So it's probably not a coincidence that year in, year out, usually the two best position groups on this team are tight end and running back. And we're really seeing that in other tight ends. Penn State ran a lot of 13 personnel tonight, which I loved. I think when you have tight ends of this caliber, and not just this caliber, but everybody brings a little something different to the table. Like Theo Johnson can be that, just as we saw tonight, that's just threaten the passing game. He runs that seam route down the middle and nobody could cover him. Tyler Warren can come out there and be an extra blocker and maul guys, and at the same time, he can catch a pass for you. Brenton Strange is another athletic freak. Everybody brings a little something different to the table, which I think is great as well. And it was a great room for Ty Howell to inherit. Ty Howell has done a great job picking up where Tyler Bowen left off. And I think those tight ends just tonight, they played a huge role in this victory for Penn State. And it's awesome to see them recruit a position that well and then see the rewards on the field. Because anyone who follows recruiting as closely as I do, you'll see teams recruit great at position and sometimes always pay off. For Penn State, the tight end recruiting has paid off and then some. Because you take a guy like Tyler Warren, who was a mid-star or mid-3-star recruit, didn't have very many Power 5 offers, and all of a sudden is looking like a potential future NFL tight end. You got to give a lot of credit to Penn State to their player development. And it's one of those positions where it's not tough to be super optimistic, super excited as a Penn State fan moving forward.
And I will say it probably helps a lot to have a former lineman be your tight ends coach, to foster that blocking mentality for our tight ends, which we know they can catch. They've proven it time after time. I mean, there was some full display today, but being able to catch and also being able to block, that's the stuff right there.
Absolutely. So I think moving on from the tight ends, I don't want to necessarily specify one specific group in general on defense, because I thought from the defensive line on back to the secondary, all play a terrific game again today. I think this very well could be remembered as the best defense Brent Pry has had at Penn State. They are fast, they are aggressive, they are violent, they fly to the ball. This might be the best secondary, not just in the Big Ten, but in discussion for the best secondary in the Power 5. This pass rush, even without Adisa Isaac, has been tremendous. Tonight, yes, Auburn ran for 180 yards, but they only averaged 4 yards a carry. You'll give up 4 yards a carry week in and week out because that's not going to burn you. They held Bo Nix to 21 to 39 passing. Again, you'll give up 21 out of 39 passing week in and week out. Like that's not going to hurt you when the opposing quarterback is only completing 53% of their passes. The defense, I think I don't know if they even had a sack tonight, to be honest with you, but they were constantly in Nix's face. They were making life difficult on him. They were hitting him. I know there was a play early in the game. I think it might have been Arnold Abakade maybe, who buried Nix into the ground, and his right arm seemed to bother him the rest of the game. Like, those are the kinds of things where you don't necessarily have to get the sack to upset the quarterback and to really kind of get things moving in your favor for your defense. I think Jesse Luketa continues to look like an absolute stud at defensive end. Brandon Smith continues to come along a linebacker. I could talk Jaquan Brisker, Jair Brown, Joey Porter Jr., Tree Castro. I could talk all freaking day about this defense and how good it's been. So I'll give the floor to you. But, man, this defense and Brent Pry deserve so much credit for what they've done through the first 3 games of the season.
I'm just glad the fans didn't get Brent Pry fired in the middle of last season, because you're right, this defense is great. And I think you make a good point with that. We could probably single out a couple of guys that did pretty well tonight and the past 2 games too. But I think what makes this defense so good is that it doesn't rely on just one guy to make things happen. It relies on everyone. If one guy is out of position, there's someone else to back him up. If one guy is unable to make a play, there's someone else ready to make that play. And this defense it's full of stars, right? There's at least 2 guys at each level that you can point to and say that person is probably going to play in the NFL. But as a unit, they know who they are. They trust each other, so no one is overcommitting and no one is out of position. And they basically make plays when they need to. And now this is the second game where it's come down to not one, but 2 fourth down situations with the opposing team basically needing a touchdown for the win or the tie in this case. And they've come through. And that happens because no one in each respective group is doing more than what is being asked of them.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think, and that's a real pleasant change from the past. I feel like in 2019, I felt like this defense too often sat around waiting for Micah Parsons or Yetur Gross-Matos to make a play. In 2018, they sat around waiting for Yetur Gross-Matos to make a play. In 2017, they sat around waiting for a Grant Haley or Marcus Allen to make a play. And this defense this year, like you said, every level, you're looking at 2 or 3 guys that can play in the NFL. The defensive line, Arnold Abakade and PJ Mustipher are making themselves a ton of money so far this season. Jesse Luketa, I personally think Luketa is a guy, if I'm him, I'm coming back next year using the COVID rule, come back for my 5th year, even though I never redshirted, spend the offseason learning the ins and outs of defensive end, and you can make yourself a lot of money as a 3-4 outside linebacker pass rusher in the NFL. You back to linebacker, Brandon Smith and Curtis Jacobs are athletic freaks who are always going to get paid in the NFL. But all of a sudden, Ellis Brooks has played probably the 3 best games of his career. And again, that secondary, like we said, Brisker, Brown, Porter Jr., Castro Fields, they all look really good. Yeah, even Daquan Hardy has been sneaky good this season. Yes, he got burnt for a big play today, but it was probably the best throw Bo Nix made all night. A perfect just back shoulder throw. There was nothing you can do as defensive back. So I think that is one thing that's been great to see with this defense too, where I felt in the past, and especially last year, there was no one there to make that play. They just sit around waiting for someone to make that play. Through 3 games this year, that has not been the case. We've seen Brisker. We've seen Abakade. We've seen Mustipher, Luketa, Brown, Porter Jr., Jacobs. That fumble, that near fumble that Curtis Jacobs almost forced night that Joey Porter Jr. housed for a touchdown that got called back. We've seen so many guys on that defense that make plays. And as someone who's been extremely critical of Brent Pry the last 2 years, I think he deserves a lot of credit, not just him, but his defensive coaching staff for training these guys. We're seeing 11 helmets with the football. We're seeing guys come out and try and rip at that ball when they get the opportunity. We're seeing defensive backs trust their instincts, trust their athleticism and jumping routes and trying to pick off passes. There were a couple times tonight, Penn State was probably a split second away from interceptions that may have gone back for a touchdown. Brandon Smith nearly gave all of us a heart attack at the end of the first half. That ball that should have been a pick six, that I'm sure even with Penn State winning, he's still kicking himself over. But yeah, this defense has just been a revelation. It's been much better than I anticipated. And like right now, I feel confident saying Penn State has one of the probably 10 to 15 best defenses in the country. And if they continue to get this defensive performance week in and week out this season, they will have an opportunity to win every game. I mean, albeit, yes, outside of Ohio State, Penn State will be more talented than every team they play the rest of the way. That said, if you have a game, maybe it's when you go to Kinnick Stadium. Maybe it's when you go to East Lansing at the end of the year against the Michigan State team looks pretty good. Maybe it's when you welcome Michigan to Happy Valley in November. You may have a game where you play poorly and your defense is able to bail you out, which is awesome because that's something Penn State hasn't always had. But this defense is going to keep them in every game. PKL, I see you in the comments. I totally agree. Penn State's defense is the real deal. This is, in my opinion, the best defense they have had under Brent Pryce, I've said. And it's a lot of fun to watch. As a guy who, as on my son's sixth grade team, I coach a lot of the defense. I love defensive football. It is what I live for. It is so much fun to see the Nittany Lions have a just absolute awesome defense that will fly to the ball, punch you in the mouth, and try and jump every route you throw in the secondary.
And I think another good outcome of having so much talent, experience, and trust spread around is that they don't have to give up on being aggressive in order to be able to make these plays, right? They can still be aggressive, and they know that if that aggressiveness bites them, there's someone who's going to be able to make that play in the back end. So I'm with you. Kudos to the defense. It's a complete 180 from last season. I've always believed Ben Pryce to actually be a good coach, but this particular year, he is definitely earning his salary. I want to, before we move on, I want to address one of the comments. I actually think Tank Bigsby is good. I don't know yet if he is great, but I do want to say I think Tank Bigsby looked the way he did today because of Penn State's defense. I'm pretty sure he's going to get his against some of the teams that are left on Auburn's schedule. I'd rather give more credit to Penn State defense than kind of take credit away from Tank Bigsby and what he's done so far this season.
No, I totally agree. I think Tank Bigsby is a very good running back. I feel confident saying through 3 weeks he's the best running back Penn State has faced thus far. Honestly, he might be the best running back Penn State faces all season. The dude is a stud. But like you said, Penn State's defense rose to the occasion. For the most part, they kept him pretty well in check. You know, anytime you face a running back the quality of Bigsby and you hold that team to 4 yards rushing or 4 yards per rush, you'll take that. You'll take that all day. And hey, you know what? I just hope that Tank Bigsby, when Auburn goes into the Iron Bowl, runs for 300 yards and 5 touchdowns just to make Penn State look good. And hey, strength of schedule, baby. At this point, if you're Penn State, you went to Wisconsin and won. You've beaten Auburn at home. Indiana looks like junk. Michigan's offense doesn't look good. If you're Penn State, you got a trip to Kinnick, you've got a trip to the Horseshoe against the Ohio State team that again looks beatable. You've got to be thinking college football playoff at this point. You've got to be thinking strength of schedule. You've got to be thinking all of this. So if you're a Penn State fan, as hard as it may be to do after what we had to deal with on Twitter all week with Auburn fans, is I know it's going to be hard for me to do because of that, because as Auburn fans will tell you, it just means more in the South. And real quick, as an aside, listen, Penn State was a 5.5 point favorite and beat Auburn by 8. Can you imagine if State College was located south of the Mason-Dixon line? If you took State College, you moved to like 3 hours south, Can you imagine how badly Penn State would have beaten Auburn tonight if they were just in the South? But no, I digress. But no, if you are a Penn State fan, you've got to be rooting for Auburn to win as many games as possible on the stretch up the strength of schedule. And that's where you want to see Tank Bigsby do well. And also, if Tank Bigsby does come out and run all over some other defenses, that just further solidifies how good this Penn State defense really is. So I do agree with you that Tank Bigsby, is definitely a stud and probably one of the best running backs Penn State will see this season.
Since you brought it up, I just want to give a shout out to everyone who took Penn State -5, -6, -6.5, minus whatever the number you took them. Congrats to you. You made yourself money tonight.
I'm one of them. I had the full parlay, Penn State -5.5, Penn State on the money line, and I also barely snuck this in there, but I took the under 49.5. I hit my parlay on the game.
Woo.
Yeah, I have not lost a bet yet this weekend, so that's probably my sign to cash out and call it a day. But it was a very good gambling weekend in my household.
I'm one of those patient gamblers. So I put 80% of my stash on Penn State. I actually kind of played the line as it went down. So I started at 6.5, then I did 6, then I did 5. I was too late for 4, but regardless, it doesn't matter. All of them hit. The rest of the week was a shit show, but I blame Pitt for that because I had like the 20% of what I had left for everyone. I basically put most of it on a teaser that had Pitt in it because for whatever reason, I believe Pitt to be a football team. They once again proved that they are not, and they let Western Michigan run and pass all over them. And
that's
here we are.
Trust in Pitt, dude. It's Pitt. This had Pitt let down. Not to get off topic, but this had Pitt let down written all over it.
And I will own that mistake and never take them again.
So, real quick here on the officiating thing, I just opened up our Black Shoe Diaries Slack channel, and it has been shared by Black Shoe Diaries' own Carrie Green in the Slack channel. She appears to have found the Twitter account of the head referee for tonight's game, and his bio on Twitter, I will read it to you word for word, and I quote, "Hardest working man on this planet we call Earth, and will always will be, War Damn Eagle for life." In case you need any more reason to believe that the officiating was a complete freaking disaster tonight. Apparently, the head official is an Auburn fanboy. So you know what? True or not, the officiating stunk, and again, that just made this victory that much more enjoyable.
Wow. I mean, I am not into conspiracy theories. My brother is. That is just kind of the icing on the cake, because if you were to go with the conspiracy, I mean, what are you going to say? You try your damn hardest to give the win to your team, and we still took it away from you. Like that's what Penn State. That's the only thing Penn State can say, right? Like,
yeah, I mean,
at least you tried.
This would be equivalent. I have a quote out of the Penn State alma mater in my Twitter bio, so that'd be equivalent to tabbing me as officiating a Penn State game. But yeah, you know what? They survived. They won. It's all that matters. The Nittany Lions are 3-0, and it's shaping up to be a very good season in Happy Valley. So before we sign off for the night, I don't want to leave the floor open. Is there anything else you want to touch on from this game tonight? I know we kind of talked off air about a few other things, a few other fun topics, or anything else you want to dive into before we sign off for the night and leave everybody with this show for the night.
Yes, there's one thing. So on the comment section this week on Black Shoe Diaries, there was a topic about perception. And one of the slants that were talked about is that maybe Penn State wants to win in a blowout, because if they win in a blowout, they get a little bit of extra hype from the media. Maybe some recruits see this and interpret it as Penn State being a great team. But the way the game played out, I am now wondering, would you rather? Would you rather have seen a blowout from Penn State, rather, or did you like the game just as it happened? I'll go first. So I actually, obviously, stress-free football is amazing. I get to go about my life and just watch in complete and total relaxation. But I actually think perception going into this game still was that, Auburn may not be Alabama, but they're still an SEC team and they have SEC speed, and this game is going to come down to, as it did, the last play of the game. And I think Penn State doing what they did and having not one, but two stands, winning just by enough to cover and make me money. Um, but to win in a semi-convincing fashion, but still in a close game, it's actually going to be great for perception. Why? Because the media and the rest of the country can still talk about Auburn as a pretty good team that fought very well. But because Penn State won, and aside, because of all the refereeing gaffes, people then talk about Penn State being that much better because they overcame Auburn's best shot and the ref's best shot and came out on top. What are your thoughts?
No, I agree. I think again, like I said, this kind of ties in what I talked about earlier. If you're a Penn State fan, you want Auburn to come out these next few weeks and win a lot of football games. It's the perception is so important in college football. And as a Penn State fan, you go back to 2019 when Penn State had the perception. Remember the first college football playoff poll that came out? Penn State was ranked fourth. Why? Because they went to Iowa and won. They had beaten Michigan at home. They had beaten Pitt and non-con at home. They were viewed as having a challenging schedule. And right now, I feel very confident if the playoff selection committee was going to release a poll tomorrow. Penn State's in the top four. You've got a road win over a ranked Wisconsin team. You've got a win at home against a ranked SEC team. And, you look forward, you've got that trip to Kinnick Stadium. You've got that trip to Columbus. Michigan's probably going to be ranked when they come to town. You're probably playing a ranked Michigan State team. So if you can win of those four games, say you win three of them, and you get Auburn, who they play Georgia State next week, they'll beat them. Then they play LSU, looks very beatable. Play Georgia, probably a loss, but then in Arkansas, who they can beat, really outside of Georgia and Alabama, every team left on Auburn's schedule is a game Auburn can win. If you can get Auburn to 8 or 9 regular season wins, and your Penn State setting at say 11-1, you're setting in a very good spot in terms of college football playoff ranking. So I totally agree with you. That perception is so important. And I also think on a kind of a different note, this close win is big because Penn State, between going to Wisconsin and the way they won that game, the way they won tonight, this team is learning to win football games that in the past, as Penn State fans, we've seen them lose far too often. Like they're learning to close these games out. They're learning to get these hard fought victories over ranked teams, which is awesome to see. And as anyone who's ever played any sport, ever faced that deadline for work, whatever it is, will tell you that adversity will do you well. And Penn State has faced a lot of adversity in the first 3 weeks. And through it all, they're 3-0 and they have 2 wins over ranked teams. And they're probably looking at being a top, 7-8 team when the AP poll comes out on Monday. So I'm with you. I think as stressful as it can be as a fan, my wife would probably agree with me. Give me credit. I only threw my hat once during this game tonight. As stressful as all as that can be, these hard fought wins teach you a lot as a team, teach you how to win, help with that perception, like you said. And again, just right now, things are going really well in the world of the Nittany Lions.
I will say, last but not least, don't forget Maryland. They might actually be a ranked Maryland if they keep going the way they are down the stretch. So you're talking about the potential to face 5 out of 7 Big Ten East teams that are ranked, the top 2 teams in the West that are, one of them is most likely going to be the representative in the championship game, facing an SEC team that, if all goes well, will end the season ranked. We're talking about a incredibly tough schedule. And if they find, or not find, but if they continue to find ways to win, we're talking, yeah, we're talking a I don't want to put the cart before the horse here, but a one-loss season out of this particular schedule, you said it. It would put the Lions in a very good spot. But here's to hoping that there just simply are no losses and we don't have to worry about it.
Give me that. Give me. I mean, I feel like every year when we do our Black Sheep Diary season predictions, you're always the one that says 15-0 or GTFO. So give me that. Just run the table, make it not even matter. But no, in all honesty, if you set it 11-1, you have a win over Auburn, win over Wisconsin, wins over, say, Iowa and Ohio State, whatever it might be, you're going to be in a good spot. The perception matters. You want to see Auburn finish strong, and that's what's going to matter for Penn State moving forward. You know, same way as Wisconsin. If you're a Penn State fan, you're a big Wisconsin fan the rest of the way, unless you run into them again in Indianapolis. If you're a Penn State fan, you're a big Auburn fan the rest of the way. You're a big Ball State fan the rest of the way. Teams you beat, you root for them because it matters your strength of schedule, and that is where the perception comes in. And like you said, that close win could prove to be more important than if you come out and you curb stomp Auburn 42-20 and you kill the morale and they come out and lay an egg and lose 2 or 3 games they have no business losing.
Indeed.
All right, well,
friends.
Yeah, unless you have anything else, Ellie, I think that'll do it for tonight. We thank you for listening along. We thank you for following along. As always, every Saturday we will be here for our live recap show of the Nittany Lions. We're still working on that name for the show. If anyone has any good ideas, like Tim said last week, feel free to drop it in the comments. But until then, we will see you next Saturday after what will hopefully be a much more comfortable Penn State victory over the Villanova Wildcats.
Thanks, everyone.